In the heart of a sunflower field lived a tiny bee named Nibby, whose greatest fear was also his biggest passion, flying. You see, Nibby loved nothing more than the feel of the wind beneath his wings, the sun on his back, and the world spread out before him like a patchwork quilt. But there was a massive problem. While Nibby dreamed of soaring through the sky, his legs were perfectly happy keeping him grounded. That's because instead of flying, Nibby spent his days bouncing from flower to flower, collecting pollen on his fuzzy little belly, and pretending that he was terrified out of his fuzzy little mind. Now, all the other bees in Nibby's hive did things the normal way, buzzing and booming through the air while they gathered pollen and nectar. But since Nibby refused to fly, he had to find other ways to do his job. So, instead of flying to the sunflowers, he hopped on a passing ladybug. And when the ladybird landed, he bounced off her shell into the sunflower, and so on, and so forth. It worked, but it meant that Nibby never got to see the world, at least not until one summer evening. For that was a night that the queen bee announced a grand contest. Whoever brought back the rare midnight nectar from the tallest sunflower would be crowned the royal pollinator. Now, the midnight nectar was an incredibly special treat. It can only be harvested after the moon was full and shone its brightest, high atop the tallest sunflower on the hill overlooking the entire field. The prize was great, but so was the challenge, because that flower only bloomed for just a few minutes each year. If the bees didn't get there in time, they wouldn't get any nectar at all. Well, the hive buzzed with excitement as the best flyers in the colony prepared to take part in the race. There was Berry White Wings, known for his speed, Hazel, the most graceful flyer in the hive, and Chester Chipper, whose pollen baskets were always overflowing. Even Nibby's older sister, Beatrice, whose wings were as steady as the North Star, decided she would enter the contest. But then suddenly, just as the moon hit its peak and the flowers should have started to glow, a strong gust of wind swept across the field, blowing the bees far off course. One by one, they returned to the hive, tails between their legs, empty baskets in their paws, until finally, only Nibby remained. Now, Nibby was terrified, but he was determined not to let his family down. So he took a deep breath, shook off his nervousness, and began hopping from flower to flower, petal to petal, until he reached the edge of the sunflower field. As he looked up, he saw the moon reflecting in a nearby puddle. It was almost midnight. Then suddenly, a friendly firefly landed nearby. "Going somewhere?" she asked kindly, and Nibby explained about the midnight nectar and how he needed to reach the tallest sunflower before time ran out. "Hop on my back," the firefly said with a smile. "I'll give you a lift." And with that, she zoomed up and away into the night sky. The wind whipped through Nibby's hair. The world spun round him in a dizzying ray of colors and lights. And as the firefly flew higher and higher, the flower field became smaller and smaller until it looked like a patchwork quilt spread out over the hills. Then finally, through the trees on the far horizon, Nibby saw it, the tallest sunflower, glowing like a golden star against the dark blue sky. But as he looked back at the hive, he realized just how far away it was and how much higher he would need to fly if he wanted to make it back in time. Then suddenly, another bug whizzed past. "Ho! Watch it!" Nibby shouted, but the bug didn't slow down. In fact, it seemed to go faster, dodging and darting between every leaf and twig as it raced toward the light. As it drew closer, Nibby could see that it was a moth, and not just any moth, but a member of the infamous moonbeam moths, known throughout the land for their dazzling beauty and even more dazzling curiosity. And this particular moth, well, she was the biggest one Nibby had ever seen, with wings like stained glass windows set against the darkness. She floated to a stop in front of Nibby and the firefly. "Going somewhere?" she asked in a voice like rustling leaves. Nibby explained about the midnight nectar and the race, but the moth just smiled mysteriously. "You want to win the prize, don't you?" she asked. Nibby nodded, and the moth gestured with her wing for them to follow her. At first, Nibby was nervous, but as they flew, he realized something wonderful. This moth knew the forest like the back of her hand. She swerved and soared through the trees with such grace that Nibby forgot his fear and simply marveled at the beauty of the night. Soon, the tall sunflower loomed before them once again, closer now and more magnificent than ever. When the moth stopped in front of it, Nibby thanked her for her help, but she just smiled and disappeared into the blossoms. Now, Nibby had made it, but there was still the small matter of getting back. He searched for the firefly, but she was nowhere to be found, and as he looked around, he realized he was surrounded by hundreds, maybe thousands of moths, all staring at him with those big, beautiful eyes. They must have been attracted by the light from the sunflower, or maybe they had followed the firefly here. Either way, Nibby was trapped, and the moths began to close in. "Help!" Nibby cried, and the moths all leaned in closer, their whispers like the rustle of dry leaves. "Why are you afraid?" one of them asked. "There's safety in numbers," said another. "Let us help you," they all cried, and they surged forward. Well, Nibby panicked and started to bounce, hoping to escape their grasp. But the moths were too quick. They blocked his path, trapping him between themselves and the flower. Then they began to spin around him in a dizzying circle, their wings making a low humming sound. And in that moment, something inside Nibby snapped. Fear turned to anger, uncertainty turned to resolve, and his desire to win the race filled him with strength. Taking a deep breath, Nibby straightened his wings and pushed off the ground as hard as he could. Up, up and away he went, sailing through the night sky like he had been born to fly. The moths gasped in surprise, but that didn't stop them from chasing after him. They swooped and soared through the air, diving and banking as they tried to catch up. And although Nibby's heart pounded in his chest like a drum, he flew on, dodging and darting between the branches as he made his way back to the hive. Just when he thought he might make it, the moths closed in once more, cutting off his path and blocking his way. But Nibby wasn't scared anymore. In fact, he felt like he could fly forever. Diving and banking, he weaved between the moths, then burst out of the trees and onto the open field. With one last burst of speed, he reached the hive and landed safely inside, buzzing with exhaustion, but also with triumph. Nibby stumbled out of the forest and collapsed at the feet of the queen bee. I did it, he gasped, holding out his basket. "I brought back the midnight nectar." The queen bee smiled and dipped her head in approval. "You have shown great courage and determination, Nibby," she said. "You are indeed the royal pollinator." And with that, she placed the crown on his head. As the other bees cheered, Nibby looked back at the forest. It was just beginning to lighten, and in the distance, he could see the firefly and the moth waving to him. Then, as the sun rose higher in the sky, Nibby realized something. He wasn't afraid of flying anymore. In fact, when he looked up at the sky, he felt a thrill of excitement. He couldn't wait to explore the world and see everything it had to offer. From that day on, Nibby was known throughout the hive as the bravest bee of them all. And whenever he saw a firefly or a moth, he remembered the friends he had made in the forest and the courage that had blossomed in his heart. The end.